Gateway to the World. B2 Plus Student's Book by David Spencer. Unit 1. Reading. Being good to others is being good to yourself.
Have you ever heard the expression, "It's better to give than to receive"? For years, psychologists have been investigating the effects of kindness, not just on the person receiving the act of kindness, but also on the person giving it. Here are some of their findings. In one study published by Science magazine in 2008, researchers measured how happy people were in the morning. They then gave them $5 or $20 and told them that they had to spend it either on themselves or others before 5 p.m. that day. In the evening, the researchers phoned the people taking part to reassess their levels of happiness. The results showed that those participants who had spent the money on other people, by buying them a little gift or making a donation to charity, were happier than those who used the money to pay one of their own bills or to buy themselves a gift. Generosity seemed to have a boomerang effect and benefited the giver. Apparently, being kind can even make physical tasks seem easier. In a study about helping, researchers from Peking University in China asked participants to wait in the reception hall of a university building and said they hadn't decided which room they were going to use. When each participant arrived, a research assistant had been waiting there for a while, standing next to 2 cardboard boxes at the bottom of a staircase. The assistant then did one of 2 different things. In some cases, the assistant pretended to have trouble carrying the boxes up the stairs, dropped one, and asked the participant if they could lend them a hand. In others, the assistant simply explained that the first part of the study was for the participants to carry a box up the stairs. Afterwards, participants had to estimate the weight of the box. Incredibly, the participants who acted out of kindness by helping the assistant carry the box estimated its weight as lighter than those who simply carried the box because they thought it was part of the study. Meanwhile, being unkind clearly has its dangers. Many of us like to gossip about others, but Dr. John J. Skoronsky and other researchers from the Ohio State University at Newark decided to look into the negative aspects of this type of behaviour. The researchers asked an actor to record a video in which they spoke about another person, a colleague or friend. In the video, the actor made negative comments about their colleague, for example, accusing them of being cruel to animals. The participants in the experiment watched the video and then answered questions about the speaker. What was unusual was that the participants often attributed the same negative personality trait of cruelty to the speaker, despite the fact that they were clearly describing someone else, not themselves. In other words, there is a boomerang effect. When a person spreads negative gossip behind someone's back, the listener will often subconsciously attach the same negative personality traits to the speaker, not just the person they are speaking about. The good news is that when you describe somebody else as kind and intelligent, listeners usually see you in just the same way. Finally, did you know that we are kinder to others when we're alone or in small groups than when we're in large ones? In the 1960s, 2 psychologists called Bibb Latané and John Darley asked a student to pretend to fall ill in a busy part of New York. They repeated the experiment with different numbers of people present. The student received help 85% of the time when there was 1 person present, but only around 30% of the time when there was a group of 5 people there. Psychologists have repeated similar experiments, and the results are always the same. The larger the group, the bigger the chance people will give you the cold shoulder. Latané and Dali suggested different reasons for this. Firstly, when there is a sudden emergency, we can't be sure whether it is real, not very serious, or just a trick. To decide, we usually observe other people. If they aren't doing anything, then maybe the situation is not serious and we can just continue on our way. The downside is that everyone does exactly the same and nobody reacts. Secondly, when there are lots of people around, everyone is waiting for somebody else to take the initiative and do something. Why should you do it? However, when you are on your own, there's no one else to take responsibility. Under those circumstances, most people are willing to stick their neck out for someone else.
Unit 1. Listening. Exercise 2.
Shaking hands, giving high fives, bumping fists or elbows, kissing cheeks, and many other different gestures. They're all part of the fascinating world of the social etiquette of greeting one another. Today, to help us learn more about these social customs, psychologist Paula Wilson is with us. Paula, let's talk about the handshake first. It's a gesture that is so common in Western culture, and it's been around for a very long time, hasn't it?
Yes, it has, for thousands of years, really. Perhaps the earliest representation of a handshake comes in a 9th century image showing a king of Assyria shaking hands with a Babylonian ruler, and it seems to represent some sort of partnership between them.
The popular theory is that the handshake was originally a sign of peace, isn't it? Why is that?
Well, hundreds of years ago, people would carry weapons with them at all times, particularly swords and knives. So, by offering your right hand, you were showing that you weren't holding a weapon and that you weren't going to attack. Some people think that by shaking hands up and down, not just touching hands, they were checking that the other person didn't have a knife or dagger hidden up their shirt sleeve. I'm not so sure about that, though.
But people in this part of the world haven't always greeted each other with a handshake, have they?
No, for a while it went out of fashion. People used to greet each other in different ways. For instance, bowing their heads slightly, or by touching or tipping their hats. But some people think it was a religious group called the Quakers who made the handshake popular again in the 17th century. For them, it was a sign that all people were equal. Then handshakes became common between politicians and business people as a sign of trust. So it's a formal, professional gesture, not just a question of saying hello. Business people will usually shake hands at the start of meetings and to close deals. Although you do meet people who are always giving really aggressive handshakes as a way of trying to get the other person under their control.
That brings us to one of the problems with the handshake, doesn't it? Hygiene.
Well, yes. Research from the University of Colorado at Boulder suggests we carry on average about 150 different species of bacteria on our hands. And it seems we shake hands around 15,000 times in our lifetime.
I suppose the high five and fist bump are safer then?
Yes. Some people have calculated that they probably cut the amount of bacteria by half. One story suggests that the person who started bumping fists was American baseball player Stan Musial in the 1950s and 60s. He was convinced that he was always catching colds because of shaking hands with so many fans. Although there are other people who say that the fist bump came from boxers who couldn't shake hands because of their boxing gloves, or even motorbike riders for a similar reason.
And of course today, when there are occasionally very serious health risks around the world, we now see people doing the elbow bump to say hello, which is probably safer.
That's right. In fact, in 2006, the World Health Organization recommended people do elbow bumps instead of shaking hands.
So, do you think the handshake will disappear one day?
Good question. We're used to shaking hands, and it's such a big part of our Western culture that I find it hard to imagine.
Yes, we mustn't forget that not all cultures use the handshake, do they?
No, there are many different ways of saying hello. In India, for example, people just put their own hands together. That's the greeting known as Namaste. In Thailand, people normally press their palms together and bow their heads slightly. Your thumbs should touch your chin and your fingers touch your forehead. It's called the Y, W-A-I.
There's an interesting gesture in Tibet, isn't there?
Yes, there's a polite greeting where people put their hands together and place them in front of their chest, and they also stick out their tongue. Apparently, a long time ago, they used to do this to prove that they weren't the reincarnation of a cruel king from the 9th century who had a black tongue.
I see. And then we have kissing, pressing noses, all sorts of different greetings. Paula, thanks for explaining just some of them for us today.
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 3. Speaker 1.
Let me see. I only speak 2 languages, Spanish and English, but I reckon it's really important to speak different languages. Firstly, I think it helps you when you travel. For instance, I went on holiday to Germany recently and I could only communicate with people thanks to English. Also, knowing another language can help you to get a job, because the world is quite a small place and companies need people who can speak different languages nowadays. That's why it's so important.
Speaker 2.
That's an interesting question. I'm really busy with my studies this year, but I love music and I can play the guitar. So usually I'll play my guitar for an hour or so each day. It helps me to clear my mind and feel less stressed out. Apart from that, I love reading. I find that a good book can help me to forget everything else that I'm doing. Personally, I think hobbies are really important in our daily lives.
Speaker 3.
Well, it depends. If it's my friends, I think using social media is the easiest way to stay in touch. For example, I spend a lot of time sending my friends text messages and sharing photos and videos because it's so fast and easy. But with my family, it's different. That's because my grandparents and uncles don't use social media much, so the only contact we have is when we meet face to face for family celebrations. As a matter of fact, we don't actually meet very often because we live in different cities.
Unit 1. Vocabulary. Exercise 6. 1.
Oh, well, my team has lost again, as always.
2.
It can't be. I thought you were dead.
3.
Hey! Come back here, you thief! Come back this minute!
4.
But, Mum, why can't I have an ice cream? I want one. It's not fair. Please.
5.
Ah! It's an enormous spider!
6.
Don't tell Alex about the surprise party.
7.
Sorry, I didn't really mean to do it. Well, not exactly.
8.
Oh no, not another exam?
Unit 1. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Body idioms and human interaction.
Be all ears. Be at each other's throats. Do something behind someone's back. Get on someone's nerves. Get something off your chest. Give someone the cold shoulder. Have someone under your thumb. Lend someone a hand. Pick someone's brains. Pull someone's leg. Put your foot down. Stick your neck out for someone.
Unit 1. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Word formation. Noun suffixes.
Action. Actor. Coincidence. Conclusion. Decision. Difference. Failure. Honesty. Importance. Kindness. Movement. Owner. Participant. Participation. Partnership. Perception. Possibility. Prediction. Probability. Psychologist. Punishment. Realist. Reality. Reception. Researcher. Speaker.
Unit 1. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Similes.
As brave as a lion. As busy as a bee. As clear as crystal. As clear as mud. As cold as ice. As cool as a cucumber. As easy as ABC. As free as a bird. As fresh as a daisy. As good as gold. As plain as day. As quick as a flash. As quiet as a mouse. As safe as houses. As solid as a rock. As white as a sheet. Be like a dream come true. Run like the wind.
Unit 1. Check it. Vocabulary 4. Ways of talking.
Gasp. Groan. Mutter. Shriek. Sigh. Whine. Whisper. Yell.
Unit 2. Reading. How young should a young driver be?
What is the best age to learn to drive? This may seem like a simple question, but there is a surprising difference between the legal requirements in different countries, and a lot of disagreement on national levels. Until 2011 in New Zealand, you only had to be 15 to be able to drive. Then the New Zealand government decided to raise the legal age to 16, suggesting that they might toughen this up in the not-too-distant future. The change may well have had something to do with the fact that the fatality rate of drivers was 60% higher than in neighbouring Australia. Unfortunately, the changes to the law did not go down well in rural areas, where there is almost no public transport, and parents have to chauffeur their kids around whenever they want to go anywhere. Plus the fact that in farming areas, many teens must learn to drive so that they can help out with the work. Many New Zealanders who are against the raising of the legal age argue that the government needn't have done it. They say they shouldn't have bothered, since often the highest number of accidents will come in a driver's first year. They claim that it's irrelevant whether that first year is at the age of 15, 16 or 17. However, in the US, where you can begin driving at the age of 14 in some states, there has been a lot of research done into the question of age and how it affects the skills needed on the road. What they've discovered is that there is a part of the brain that helps to control impulsive behaviour and warn us of imminent danger. This only fully develops by the age of 25. Interestingly, there is evidence to suggest that a lot of development happens between the ages of 16 and 18, and so a new 17 or 18-year-old driver will be safer than a new 16-year-old driver. This means there's a scientific basis to explain why teenagers sometimes have a tendency to be careless and rash, and this can obviously also have an influence on the way they behave when they fasten up their seatbelts behind the steering wheel. In response to these scientific findings, some in the US think the legal age of drivers should be raised. Sadly, the statistics are clear. According to a 2017 US National Household Travel Survey, the chance of a 16-year-old driver having a crash is 1.5 times higher than for drivers aged between 17 and 19. And there is also more chance a teenage driver will have an accident when they have someone else in the car with them. With 2 or more passengers, the fatal crash risk for 16 to 19-year-old drivers is more than 5 times what it is when driving alone. Why? Maybe it's simply because they become distracted by the presence of other people in the car. Or maybe it's because teenagers are more likely to take risks and break speed limits when driving with their friends, since they want to show off and go fast. Whatever the reason, the discovery has led to some states implementing a system known as graduated licensing rules, where 16-year-olds are not allowed to drive without parental supervision until they have driven a certain number of hours. This scheme has already contributed to saving lives. But one problem is that parents have to enforce it, and many are not doing so. Parents are seen as contributing to the lowering of standards amongst young UK drivers too. In the UK, you don't have to be 18 to start driving. You need to be 17 to get a provisional driving licence, but you don't have to have a minimum number of lessons. In the past, British parents would accompany their teenage children on informal practice driving lessons, so that with these extra hours, they could become more confident and competent drivers. Nowadays, parents tend not to do this to avoid the typical family rows and shouting that sometimes follow. However, a study shows that today's young motorists don't have enough hours of professional lessons before taking and passing their test. In addition, 27% of young drivers say they never went out once with their parents to gain extra driving experience either. These two factors may explain why 10% of British drivers aged between 17 and 21 feel they shouldn't have passed their driving test. In many countries, then, there is some debate as to what the best age is to become a driver. In general, because of the worrying statistics, there is a growing feeling that the age should be made higher. With more and more young drivers on the road, the debate is clearly here to stay.
Unit 2. Listening. Exercises 2 and 3.
Today on the Book Corner podcast, we're here with Tim Parker, who's just written a fascinating book called A History of Speed, looking at how speed has changed our world. Tim, When did speed become so important in our daily lives?
Difficult to say exactly, but the railway certainly had a big impact on changing the pace of life forever. I mean, before trains became such a common means of transport, in the 1830s for example, the clocks in different cities in Great Britain marked different times. Town halls simply adjusted their clocks according to the position of the sun. So, Oxford could be 5 minutes behind London, and Exeter could be 14 minutes behind. And nobody cared about local differences. But once trains started travelling up and down the country, all train timetables needed to be uniform to help passengers to make their connections and, above all, to make sure trains didn't simply crash into each other due to a lack of planning and coordination.
How fast were trains in the 1840s?
The maximum speed was just 50 kilometres per hour, but in a world where the horse was the fastest means of transport, that was quite a big change. Many people were concerned about the possible negative effects of train travel. For example, in 1868, a doctor called Alfred Haviland claimed that people who regularly went by train on the Brighton to London route were going to get older faster than those who didn't. Suffocation was another fear that some other doctors and experts shared because of these new high speeds.
But then came the car, didn't it? Which completely changed our concept of speed.
That's right.
I heard that a man used to have to walk in front of a car with a red flag to warn people and animals that a car was coming.
A law did exist. It went from about 1865 to 1898, but it's kind of a myth really, because the law was mainly for bigger vehicles, such as things called steam buses and traction engines, not so much for actual cars. But there were speed limits in the early days of driving. The first one in the world took effect in Britain in 1861. Drivers weren't allowed to drive faster than 10 kilometres per hour.
Did people respect that limit?
More or less. But in January 1896, Walter Arnold became the first ever person to be caught speeding. In a busy part of London, he broke a 3 kilometre per hour limit by driving at around 13 kilometres per hour. The policeman who arrested him caught him by chasing him on a bike.
Well, what about car chases? I think of them as a fairly recent thing.
In Britain, the first one took place in 1899. A police officer was walking along a road when he saw somebody suspicious selling fake circus tickets. The police officer went up to question the man, but he jumped into a car and drove off. The officer ran after the car, but he was too slow, so he stopped another car that was passing by and jumped in. Both cars went at around 24 kilometres per hour, where the speed limit was around 19. After about 5 kilometres, the officer stopped the man and made his arrest. His superiors congratulated him for the arrest, but told him off for breaking the speed limit himself.
One other interesting section in the book is where you talk about the colour of speed. Can you explain?
I think people often think of red as the colour of speed, maybe because we associate it with fast Italian sports cars. In Italian, they call that colour rosso corsa, racing red. There's a story behind that. Back in 1907, an Italian prince called Scipione Borghese accepted a challenge to drive from Peking, or Beijing as it is now known, to Paris, which some people thought impossible. Cars were still quite basic at that time, and the organisers wanted to test their limits. Prince Borghese loved adventure, and he competed against 4 other teams to try to be the fastest to do it. although winning was just a question of national honour and pride, not financial rewards. Borghese drove an Italian car painted bright red, or rather, his driver did. Borghese was more or less a passenger, to be honest. Anyway, they drove about 15,000 kilometres, past the Great Wall of China, through the Gobi Desert and Ural Mountains. It took about 2 months. Even though it was a race, Borghese went hundreds of miles off the route just to attend a special dinner in St. Petersburg. But he still won by a difference of just 1 hour. And after that, bright red became Italy's national racing colour. Later, Enzo Ferrari chose it for his own cars.
Thanks for those interesting anecdotes about the origins of our obsession with speed, Tim.
Unit 2. Developing Speaking. Exercise 2.
Well, they're both pictures of drivers in their cars, but one shows a moment where the police have stopped the driver, whereas the other one looks like it could be a driving lesson. Although it's probably a test to get a driving licence, because I can see some sort of evaluation sheet in the foreground. I think in the first photo, the driver must have done something wrong, because the police officer looks very serious. The driver seems to have committed some sort of offence. I suppose she may well have driven too fast and broken a speed limit. Or she might have caused an accident. I think she must be showing the police officer some personal ID, because I think the police officer is checking some type of card. One significant difference between the photos is that both people in the second photo look quite happy. The examiner might be telling the driver that she has just passed the test. As for how the people are feeling, as I said before, the police officer looks very serious, maybe even a little angry. The driver must be a little worried and nervous. Perhaps she was driving too fast because she was late, and now she's going to be even later. On the other hand, the instructor and driver in the other photo seem relaxed and cheerful, almost as if they're enjoying this experience. I think that must mean that she's a great driver.
Unit 2. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Compound nouns. Cars and the road.
Driving licence. Motorway. Pile-up. Road rage. Road safety. Road sign. Roundabout. Service station. Speed camera. Speed limit. Steering wheel. Traffic jam. Traffic light.
Unit 2. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Collocations with take, make and do.
Take a call. Take control. Take a course. Take cover. Take a decision. Take effect. Take an interest. Take offence. Take part. Take place. Take power. Take a risk. Take a test. Make an apology. Make an attempt. Make a call. Make a change. Make a choice. Make a comment. Make a complaint. Make a decision. Make a difference. Make an improvement. Make a mistake. Make a suggestion. Make use of something. Do business. Do a course. Do an experiment. Do harm. Do household chores. Do the ironing. Do research. Do a test. Do your best.
Unit 3. Reading. Child prodigies. What happens when they grow up? Andrew Halliburton, 23, began studying maths with secondary school pupils at 8.
Before Andrew was 2, his parents realised that he could recognise numbers and letters when, in the living room of the family's flat in Dundee, he watched a popular TV game show involving maths and spelling tasks. His dad, Al, a driver, and his mum, Jean, a cleaner, were baffled. When he was young, I thought he was hyperactive, Jean says. They took him to see doctors, and they said the same. But they were wrong. Luckily, when Andrew was still very young, the council recognised his promise and provided him with a tutor and a computer. At 9, his maths classmates were 13 and 14. It didn't faze me, he says. He was big for his age, almost 1.8 metres by the time he was 11, which was when he sat his standard level maths exam. Then, for the first time in his life, he felt pressured and started to panic. His peers, teachers and parents all expected him to do well. Then there was the media. A picture of him sitting on a pile of textbooks is still on his parents' living room wall. Genius Andrew Halliburton was how one of the biggest national newspapers referred to him. But for a shy boy, talking to the media was tough. I could hardly get my words straight, he says of a TV news appearance. That built up a lot of pressure for me before the exam. He ended up with a grade 2. He took his next level exams more slowly, got top grades and went straight to an applied computing course at university. For years, this had been the ultimate goal. It was a disappointment, because it was less challenging than he had expected. He stopped studying at university after just the first year. After dropping out, he got a job at McDonald's. 5 years later, he continues to work there. He sometimes enjoys seeing the surprised look on customers' faces when he calculates the bill in his head. I always thought of myself as a bit of a nerd, but he hates the word genius. I never liked the term. It shocks people, Andrew says, but he doesn't really like doing maths. He's going back to university in September, this time to pursue his real passion, computer game technology. I always thought my parents wouldn't accept that, he says, but his dad Al is over the moon.
Jennifer Pike, 20, became at 12 the youngest winner of Young Musician of the Year.
Jennifer is very aware that the number of musical prodigies whose early talent has ended in tragedy could make up a full orchestra. And she knows of exceptionally talented musicians of her age who have struggled to live up to family expectations and the pressures of the music business. In 2002, Jennifer, aged 12, became the youngest winner of the BBC Young Musician of the Year competition. But then she avoided publicity to turn her mind to quiet but intense musical study and is now balancing studying at Oxford with 40 concerts a year around the world. We have long been fascinated by musical prodigies. Mozart famously began composing at 5, but great artists are often seen as manipulated victims. We also assume things come easily to gifted people. "I'm very serious and very dedicated," she says. Her career has meant sacrifices. She remembers not going away on holiday so she could play expensive, top-quality violins. And there are many things, from basketball to skiing, she would like to do but can't, for fear of injuring her hands. The daughter of talented composer Jeremy Pike, Jennifer was taken to concerts as a baby. A few weeks before her 5th birthday, she picked up a violin. Her dad immediately spotted her natural talent, but her drive, she says, was her own. The number of young people I've met with somebody speaking for them, literally forcing them to do this. I am lucky. I have a very inspiring and supportive family. As a child, she always wanted to do more practice and learn to play better. It was she who had to push her teachers. She went to an important music school aged 8. Then, at 16, began to do a 3-year postgraduate course in music. Last autumn, she started an undergraduate music degree at Oxford. "I'm really going for the whole life of being a student, not only to broaden those musical horizons, but really engage with young people. That will enrich my concert experience." To be a concert violinist, she believes you have to experience normal, I hate using that word, life. When not practicing, she watches old films and listens to jazz, Coldplay, and even heavy metal on her iPod. She doesn't feel gifted. I feel lucky to have this passion for music.
Unit 3. Listening. Exercise 2. Speaker 1.
As an artist, I spend my day drawing and painting. I really love my job, surrounded by colours, which are my passion. But after spending so long sitting down, movement is what helps me to really connect with the present. I put on some comfortable clothes, that's really important. Then my trainers, it's really important that they're comfortable too. And then I leave my house and my work behind. I just think about the feel of the breeze on my face and the different textures under my feet, all the smells, and also how my body feels. You can feel your legs and arms working together, your heart and lungs. Working from home, I find I'm so busy all the time. But that's the most important thing, in my opinion, to make sure you find time to do what you need regularly, every day if you can. It might not be long, but even just that half-hour walking in the park makes all the difference.
Speaker 2.
I've got so many exams this year at school. It can certainly get very stressful. I walk to school every day and I also have dance lessons, and I find that getting physical exercise makes me feel much more relaxed. Actually, this may sound silly, but what really helps me chill out is getting out my coloured pencils and doing something artistic. I've always loved drawing, although coming up with my own pictures is sometimes hard, so I just take other people's drawings and finish them off with my colours. It's a really good idea to find a nice quiet place to be able to concentrate. Concentrate! That's what I really recommend everyone to do. Focus on the smell of the paper, the sound of your pencil as it moves across the page, the texture of the paper and pencil. You should focus 100% on the activity you've chosen.
Speaker 3.
I've always enjoyed food. I'm studying to become a chef. I love concentrating on all the different smells and flavours food can give us, and even the sounds and textures of different food. I think All of that attention I've paid to what I'm cooking and eating has also made me focus on my own body. My favourite mindfulness technique is one where you move your attention slowly, that's important, through different parts of your body. I start from the top of my head and move all the way down to the end of my toes. Use your mind to think about how your arms, legs and back are. Warm? Tense? I learnt this technique in a special class. A teacher is useful the first time you do it, but after that you don't need one. What you do need is to feel at ease, feel warm, protected, comfortable. That's essential advice for any mindful activity, in my opinion.
Speaker 4.
I'm 25 years old and I've just started my own online business. It's really stressful, to be honest. I suddenly found myself feeling tense, uncomfortable, and in a bad mood at the end of the day. Then, somebody encouraged me to attend a mindfulness class with a really great coach. I'm so glad I met her. She was key in helping me. She taught me this technique where all you do is notice 5 things in your day that you don't usually appreciate. It could be something simple like your food. Do you really ever think about something as simple as bread? The smell, the texture, the taste. Now imagine a world without bread. That helps you to really appreciate all those things that we have got, but usually forget about. That technique has literally changed the way I see the world. So just try it. Or better, get a great instructor who can teach you to do lots of other techniques too.
Speaker 5.
I've just started university, and on the first day we had the chance of attending a special mindfulness class with an absolutely brilliant teacher. We asked him to suggest different techniques to deal with the stress of studying full-time. One of them was a bit like yoga. We just sat quietly and focused on our breathing, our thoughts and the sensations all over our bodies, from head to toe. This basic technique, meditation, isn't as easy as it sounds. Sometimes your mind wanders. You find yourself thinking about where you need to go later, all the work you have to do. That's when you need to bring your mind back to the present. The best way to do this is to really concentrate on your breathing, going slowly. It should be relaxed, easy, effortless. That allows you to come back and think about the present. That's what I think is the most important thing I learnt about mindfulness, and it's something that I'm going to keep practicing, definitely, whether I continue going to mindfulness classes or not.
Unit 3. Developing Speaking. Exercise 3.
The first thing I'd like to say is that, in my opinion, schools spend a lot of time teaching us facts and getting us to memorise information. However, I believe that learning different skills such as creative and critical thinking is just as important, or possibly even more important than simple memorisation. First of all, I would argue that when we learn to think creatively and use our imagination, we become more independent learners because we can find answers for ourselves. I would say that by learning thinking skills, we can learn more and more efficiently. Whilst it's true that learning facts, dates and theories can be useful, simply memorising all this information does not actually mean that a student has understood it. In fact, a student could write a whole history essay in an exam and get full marks without really knowing what they've written. It may prove that they have a great memory, but not that they have learnt anything. Another important point to make is that, thanks to the internet, we have immediate access to all the knowledge we need. In just 2 seconds, we can find out any piece of information that somebody asks us. But the internet can't teach us to distinguish real from fake. It can't teach us to think for ourselves. In my opinion, this is what schools should help us do. Finally, I accept that knowledge is incredibly useful and can teach us a lot. However, let's not forget that the world needs new and original ideas too. By encouraging us to use our imaginations and creativity, schools can help us to come up with intelligent solutions to future problems in the world. To sum up, schools do an incredibly important job. There's no denying that part of a school's job is to pass on knowledge to students. But I believe that schools also have the obligation to help us learn skills and techniques that can help us come up with our own ideas in order to shape the future in an intelligent way.
Unit 3. Check it. Vocabulary 1. The human mind.
Articulate. Baffle. Bewildered. Child prodigy. Phase. Phased. Genius. Get your words straight. Grasp. Have a gift for. Have a talent for. Memorize. Nerd. Recall. Recognize. Turn your mind to. Your mind wanders.
Unit 3. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Phrasal verbs. Separable and inseparable.
Call off. Carry on. Catch up with. Come up with. Fit in. Get on with. Hit on. Keep up with. Leap out at. Look for. Look into. Look up to. Pass away. Pick up. Piece together. Stand out. Talk through. Work out. Write down.
Unit 3. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Word formation. Prefixes.
Antisocial. Co-star. Impenetrable. Inaccurate. Incredible. Misinterpret. Misunderstood. Overcritical. Post-production. Reunite. Semi-biographical. Subplot. Superhero. Underestimate. Underrated. Unpredictable. Unrealistic.
Unit 4. Vocabulary in context. Exercise 1.
Anatomy. Archaeology. Architecture. Biomechanics. Biomedicine. chemistry, engineering, forensic science, genetics, geology, neuroscience, nutritional science, psychology, sociology.
Unit 4. Reading. How science and technology are changing sport.
If you watch any sports event, you'll almost certainly see athletes setting new records as they become faster and stronger. As we learn more about genetics and biomechanics, and as we develop better types of technology, athletes will continue to improve their abilities and become capable of feats that were impossible to imagine just decades ago. Of course, there's one central question here. Supposing technology keeps improving, will there be an absolute maximum limit to what we can do? Will we ever hit a point where training and technology will go beyond our physical capabilities? If we look now at all the new ways to maximise our bodies' and brains' performance, it seems those limits may still be some distance away.
Tech-enabled training.
We all know that if you train hard, you get faster or stronger. But new technology is helping coaches to decide more precisely what to focus on in training. Before, coaches could only stand and watch their athletes, or at most film them, in order to make suggestions about how to perform better and improve their technique. Now, with three-dimensional modelling and biometric feedback on things like heart and breathing rates, an expert can see far more about what's happening with an athlete's body. Thanks to biomedical engineering, coaches can know exactly how their athletes are moving and how their bodies are reacting. This allows them to give immediate feedback to the athlete and helps athletes to really enhance their performance. Meanwhile, some experts expect to see sports people training with masks that provide a higher level of oxygen while they work out, something which has been shown to help an athlete push harder than they normally could.
Personalised biology and genetics.
We're learning more and more right now about how genes interact and lead to different traits and behaviours, and that knowledge will transform sport, along with everything else. Your genes might make you respond better to certain types of workouts, and knowledgeable coaches will have the chance to come up with individual exercise plans based on that information, in case they are able to give their athletes an edge. While many of the benefits of this type of information still lie in the future, there are already genetic markers that can tell how well a particular athlete's body will react when they do specific workouts, such as weight training or intensive sessions. And it's not just a question of genes. An athlete's muscles are also influenced by training, environment, and diet. Understanding how all these things interact can help coaches design workouts to enable athletes to go beyond their present limits. Of course, to become the best in any area of sport, it isn't only about physical preparation. It also requires mental training and developing essential psychological characteristics such as determination and tenacity. Mental strength can help your body keep going when you feel like you're done and you think to yourself, I wish I could stop right now. Psychology and neuroscience can help us learn how to coach someone through to the end of an ultramarathon, for example.
Augmented reality and artificial intelligence.
Augmented reality, AR, could also have a major impact on sport. AR allows you to see the world, but with extra data added on. So, in the world of American football, AR could allow the players to get live information from their helmets, reminding them of their next moves, for example. Or, taking the idea one step further, some kind of algorithm could be used to make intelligent guesses about the rival team. Although such an example may seem far-fetched, if players had a system like that, one day maybe they would be able to read the lineup of opposing players and make a guess as to what their next move would be, informed by a quick search through videos of old games. At that point, your IT department becomes just as essential as your scouting team.
Fairness.
Of course, some of these innovations, particularly technological ones, prompt questions about fairness. Modern runners benefit from new shoe technology, for example. If only great athletes from the past had had the same technology. If they had had the same shoes, would they have been even faster than today's athletes? Is it right to compare the speed of someone wearing performance-enhancing running shoes to someone without them? These are questions that society will have to answer one day. Unless it does, everything will be open to debate. Because whatever happens, and whatever we think of it, technology will continue to push the limits of sport in both minor and major ways. Perhaps the people who decide the rules of a particular sport will one day decide to ban some new technological advance or other. Until then, as long as science and technology keep improving, we'll continue to get faster and stronger.
Unit 4. Listening. Exercises 1B, 1C and 2.
Today on Food Fads, we're looking at a new science called gastrophysics. Here to explain more about it is food journalist Gabby Gregson. Gabby, can you explain?
Sure. People have been doing serious study into food science, nutrition, diets, healthy eating and cooking for ages now. But gastrophysics looks at gastronomy from the point of view of the person eating the food, not the person preparing it. The physics part comes from psychophysics, which is a branch of psychology concentrating on human perception. You know, how we notice or think about things. Basically, it's the scientific study of how our experience of food and drink is affected by our senses and our surroundings, not just the food itself.
A key figure in this is Professor Charles Spence. He's a professor of experimental psychology at Oxford, isn't he?
Yes, he's written a great book called Gastrophysics, The New Science of Eating. Spence is fascinated by the fact that the same food can taste different according to factors that have little to do with the food itself. For example, most people evaluate meals with a higher mark if the knife and fork they use are heavy and expensive. Or, for instance, I noticed that you've kindly brought some cakes and biscuits for us today and put them on a red plate. Not wishing to be rude, but did you know that if you'd put them on a different colour plate, they'd taste better?
Oh dear, sorry about that. You see, if I knew more about gastrophysics, I would never have done that.
Don't worry, at least the plate's not too big. Did you know that if you'd served the food on a larger plate, we'd almost certainly end up eating more than we would normally?
Wow. But seriously, how can the colour of a plate make any difference to how something tastes?
These are all generally subconscious, subliminal things we don't realise we notice. We might link red with stop or danger, for instance. Remember, in these experiments, there's no right or wrong answer. But usually, large majorities of people agree and give the same answers. But going back to the question of colour, one famous experiment had 4 spoons with 4 different types of cream on them. Each one was a different colour: black, green, red and white. Which one would you expect to be sweet? Which one salty, bitter or sour?
I think the red would be sweet, like strawberries, the white salty, the green sour maybe, like lime, and the black bitter, like coffee or dark chocolate.
Nearly everyone who does this test gives the same answers. That just can't be a coincidence. Before we even start to eat, our brain is sending us messages. It isn't only colours either. In 2013, a UK company changed the shape of its most popular chocolate bars. They made the bar's edges rounder, less straight. What happened? The public were convinced that the company had changed the formula and added more sugar.
Had they?
Not at all.
And sounds? Can they change the way food tastes?
One of Spencer's discoveries was named the sonic chip. By using a microphone and headphones, he increased the volume of a crisp's crunch and found you could make people think the crisps were 15% fresher. Another study found the sound of a coffee machine affects the taste of the coffee. If the machine had made a terrible high-pitched noise when making the coffee, people wouldn't enjoy drinking it as much. Spence even created different pieces of electronic music that make food taste sweeter or saltier, for example.
I've often noticed that the music that restaurants play can make a big difference to how much you enjoy a meal.
Be careful with some tricks, though. Classical music in restaurants often makes people choose more expensive dishes, and loud music makes people order more drinks.
Ha! Personally, though, apart from music, I'm not so convinced by some of the other theories.
Not all chefs are convinced either. They think the food itself is the important thing. The rest are just tricks. But even the names of dishes on a menu can change our expectations and experiences. In the past, British restaurants often used French to name dishes because it made the food sound different, special. Nowadays, you often see menus with the words organic or locally grown. That immediately changes your perception of the food.
So what do you think about gastrophysics, Gabby?
Eating isn't 100% about the food. I mean, if I went to an expensive restaurant and ate with a plastic knife and fork, I know I wouldn't enjoy the meal as much. Oh, and by the way, the more expensive something is, the better it usually tastes too. Anyway, I think that's why a lot of chefs are paying attention to gastrophysics. They're looking at the whole dining experience.
Well, the idea is certainly fascinating. Thanks, Gabby. And sorry again about the red plate.
No worries. I'll try a cake anyway.
Unit 4. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1.
Here you can see that just under half of the people who answered the question tend to agree that what they hear about science is generally true, whereas fewer than 1 in 10 tend to disagree. Personally, what I find surprising is that a third of the people who answered neither agree nor disagree. If you look, only slightly more than half of the people who answered agree strongly or otherwise that the information they hear about science is generally true, which, to my mind, is quite shocking, really. Luckily, in my opinion, only a tiny minority of people, just 1 in 100, strongly disagree that what they hear about science is true.
2.
Looking at this, you can see that people consider that the most important character trait for engineers is creativity, with nearly 50% of people choosing that quality. That's slightly more than the most important character trait for scientists, honesty, which got a score of 45%. I find that quite unusual because I think both scientists and engineers have to be equally creative and honest in their jobs. Far fewer people think that scientists need to be good at communicating, with just over 20% agreeing that that character trait is important. Personally, I think that a good scientist has to be able to explain what they're doing. Another thing I find interesting is that considerably more people think it's more important for scientists to be ethical than engineers. Maybe that's because scientists are involved in thinking about moral issues when they explore brand new areas like genetically modified food or animal testing, things like that.
3.
This is quite interesting because you can see that the number of women studying medicine, physical sciences and law has been growing steadily since before the 1970s, which I think you would expect. For example, you can see that the percentage of women studying physical sciences has been rising steadily since 1965, going from 15% to just over 40% over 45 years. What's surprising, though, is that the percentage of women studying computer science was increasing in the same way until roughly 1985. But since then, there's been a significant decline. In fact, the percentage in 2015 has changed little from the original percentage in 1965. I have no idea why. This fact baffles me.
Unit 4. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Areas of scientific study.
Anatomy. Archaeology. Architecture. Biomechanics. Biomedicine. Chemistry. Engineering. Forensic science. Genetics. Geology. Neuroscience. Nutritional science. Psychology. Sociology.
Unit 4. Check it. Vocabulary 2A. Compound nouns.
Breakthrough. Crackdown. Cutback. Drawback. Feedback. Lifespan. Outcome. Outcry. Outlook. Outset. Setback.
Unit 4. Check it. Vocabulary 2B. Compound adjectives.
Full scale. Lightweight. Long term. Worldwide. Worthwhile.
Unit 4. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Causes, reasons and results.
Bring about. Due to. Give rise to. Have an impact on. In turn. Lead to. Owing to. Prompt someone to do something. Repercussion. Side effect. Spark off. Stem from.
Unit 5. Reading. 999 Time Wasters. Where do emergency services draw the line?
With cash strapped and resources tight, emergency services are trying to cut nonsense 999 calls. But how do they stop some callers wasting their time? The emergency services often release details of time-wasting calls they receive in a bid to urge people to think twice before calling 999. Police Scotland was among a number of forces to do so when a 101 non-emergency number was launched. One caller rang 999 to complain he had been given a hamburger instead of a cheeseburger at a fast food restaurant. Other forces to have taken a similar approach include the West Midlands, which revealed one recording of a woman complaining about the sprinkles on her ice cream cone. Greater Manchester Police also revealed silly prank calls, including reports of marmalade theft and a chicken walking down the road. The Metropolitan Police, the largest UK police force, also ran a similar campaign last December. As a result, it said it had received 2,060 fewer misuse or hoax calls in the first 6 months of this year than the 28,872 such calls it received in the same period last year. Some of the calls are made by the same people, ringing 999 over and over again. Detective Superintendent Gurdip Singh from the Met Command and Control said the most frequent nuisance callers are looked at each day, with officers focusing on the top 10 in each London borough and making prosecutions where appropriate. Operators are trained to recognise misuse and hoax calls. They are also trained to recognise where callers may suffer from mental health or vulnerability issues. Where mental health issues are the catalyst, work is undertaken with the local Safer Neighbourhood teams and other relevant partner agencies to provide help for the individual and deter them from constantly calling the police. Social psychology professor Michael Moore said well-trained listeners, such as operators in 999 call centres, often know how to pick up on the signs of deliberate time wasters. There might be someone who is making these calls intentionally to harass emergency services because they want to clog the lines or whatever. There's a touch of anti-establishment attitude to making fake or hoax calls. It may even be a bored person or someone who has done it as a dare to impress a friend. For those few callers who make repeated bogus calls, the service says it will pursue prosecutions, as well as acceptable behaviour agreements, which normally precede antisocial behaviour orders. There is still concern that people dialing 999 for minor conditions, including colds and toothache, are putting the lives of genuine emergency patients at risk. But emergency services hope public education initiatives and the release of examples of inappropriate calls will help underline the message. 999 is for emergencies.
Strict rules for young gamers.
The government of Kagawa Prefecture in western Japan has passed an ordinance that will limit the amount of time that young people below the age of 20, the age of majority in Japan, will be able to spend playing video games or online. The regulations come into force next April. When they take effect, young people will only be able to use their smartphones for 60 minutes on weekdays and 90 minutes at the weekend and on holidays. According to the new plans, there are also going to be smartphone curfews after 9 p.m. for junior high school students and 10 p.m. for high school students. The ordinance calls for parents and guardians to supervise their children and make sure they follow the daily limits. There are no penalties or fines to enforce the restrictions, but residents are expected to obey the ordinance as a question of social responsibility. The local government is taking these new measures because they claim that spending too much time online or playing video games is having a negative effect on young people's health and school performance, as well as creating sleep disorders. They also believe that gaming is causing young people to spend less time with others, and point out that time spent on video games has become a global issue in the past few years. Indeed, the World Health Organization recently added video game addiction to its official list of recognised illnesses. Whilst some people have praised the move, believing that a clear time limit will be helpful for both parents and their children, there have been many criticisms of the new scheme. Although children are allowed to use their smartphones to contact family or for educational purposes, some critics argue that young people in Japan today need to develop their technological skills, and therefore imposing any limit on new technology is old-fashioned. They argue that the way to reduce time spent on gaming is either through education or on tighter restrictions on the gaming industry, not on individuals. A 17-year-old high school student named Wataru and his 42-year-old mother are going further. They are meeting a top lawyer next week to begin a fight against the ordinance at the very highest level. Wataru believes that the smartphone limits go against the national constitutional right to the pursuit of happiness, the right to privacy, and the right to self-determination. He believes families should decide for themselves how much gaming is right, especially since, as the national Japanese government itself has admitted, there is no scientific basis concerning time limits for playing games.
Unit 5. Listening. Exercise 2.
It's probably fair to say that there has never been so much surveillance in our daily lives as now, whether it's through the use of CCTV cameras on the corner of nearly every street, or the growing use of drones. But today, we ask the question, will there be even more surveillance in the future? Will somebody be watching over every move we make? To help us answer these questions, we have with us Mark Reynolds, an expert in surveillance and surveillance technology. Mark, how do you see surveillance developing?
Well, let's take a simple example. Schools. I want you to imagine a school of the future. With a facial recognition system and AI, artificial intelligence, the school will be tracking every single student as they arrive. They'll be letting teachers know who is late or who is absent. If there's a school cafe, teachers will be able to know what food each student is choosing to eat, so that they know whether they're making healthy decisions or not. If they aren't, teachers will be able to take action and redirect the students' bad decisions. And in the actual classroom, cameras will be monitoring the students' facial expressions. That way, they'll be able to detect who is paying attention, who is participating actively in the class, and who is bored, sleepy, or not participating for some other reason. By the end of just one term, they will have collected masses of data just from the students' facial expressions and body language. The school could use this data to make a difference to a student's mark, or even to make decisions about what they should study in the future, taking into account their visible degree of interest in a particular class or area of study.
That sounds like Big Brother, where someone is watching every single move we make. Surely that's not going to happen.
In fact, it's probably already on the point of happening in some countries. When you think about it, many schools already use technology to send messages to parents immediately when students don't show up to school in the morning. And in some, they use technology before important exams, using facial recognition to be sure that a student is the person they claim to be.
OK, but that's different. I think the question is the degree of control. I think we'd all agree that a certain level of monitoring is useful. Personally, I'm in favour of CCTV in city centres because I think it deters criminals. It makes them think again before committing an offence because they know somebody is watching them.
OK, so what about cameras in classrooms to stop students cheating in exams? Isn't that the same?
The problem is that it takes away the trust. It suggests that at least one person is planning on cheating. But maybe nobody is. It's creating a suggestion of guilt and creating general fear too.
I think that's a fair point. There's a fine line between looking out for bad behaviour and creating a climate of fear where nobody does anything because they're afraid somebody's watching.
In terms of technology, what's next?
Well, for a start, soon we'll be identifying people not just by facial recognition. There's now a way to identify people from just their body and the way they walk. A company has used videos of prisoners walking around, analysed them, and then shown they are able to identify the person even if they've covered their face with a cap or a hoodie. And the other main development is that the use of smart glasses is becoming more and more common in different parts of the world. In some places, by the end of the year, they will have been using special glasses to monitor travellers at train stations for 3 whole years. The glasses have built-in facial recognition. Even in crowds, the person wearing them can track down a particular person that they're looking for. But what's interesting is that a company is on the verge of perfecting some augmented reality glasses for general consumers, not police officers.
Augmented reality?
Yes, you see the real world, but then you get extra information about what you're seeing. So with these glasses, you'll be able to go to a party, look around, and with facial recognition, you'll be able to identify everyone, even if you've never met them before. But on top of that, you'll be able to access information about them, for example, directly from their social media profile and posts.
I'm not sure about that. Personally, I don't want somebody that I've never met to know all about me. And where does it stop? Could they find out where I live or any other private details? I mean, it's one thing letting law enforcement gather information and another letting private individuals use this technology. It seems wrong to me.
But again, in our modern society, it's already easy to access lots of information about people we've never met. That's normal. Most people have an online identity that's very public. You're right, though. In the future, surveillance will lead us to some very tricky situations because it's often very hard to decide what's 100% right or wrong when we talk about surveillance.
Yes, I agree. I think we've seen today that it certainly isn't easy. Thanks, Mark.
Unit 5. Developing Speaking. Exercises 4 and 5.
I'd like to begin by saying that I am in favour of the use of body cams by teachers, primarily because I am convinced that body cams could help to stop bad behaviour and indiscipline in the classroom. According to statistics, there is less crime when police officers wear body cams on the street. I strongly believe that students, like criminals, would think again before doing something disruptive in class if they knew their teacher was filming them.
First of all, I'd like to point out that teachers are not police officers. Secondly, teachers do not deal with criminals and crime. They deal with students who are in class to learn, not to disrupt lessons as you seem to think. It's true that there may be misbehaviour in some classes, but that is part of growing up. Slight misbehaviour, in my view, is not a criminal offence.
Students are in class to learn. I couldn't agree with you more. But you can't deny that in some classes, a lot of time can sometimes be wasted by just 1 or 2 students who don't really want to learn. Those students stop the whole class from learning. If a teacher had a body cam, it would help them to spend more time teaching and less time telling their students off.
You've got a point. But meanwhile, all those good students that you mention will feel nervous and shy and will probably stop participating in activities because they won't want to have somebody filming everything they say. I definitely think that if a teacher wears a camera, it will ruin the relationship between him or her and the students. Both students and the teacher will be unable to laugh or joke or relax.
I see what you mean, but I'm pretty sure that after just a day or 2, everybody in the class would get used to being filmed. Not to mention the fact that students who behave normally, the vast majority of students, will have nothing to worry about, precisely because they behave normally. And there's no doubt in my mind that teachers could find watching films of the class useful to analyse and perfect their lessons.
Well, If you ask me, I think wearing a body cam will almost certainly mean that teachers will feel less comfortable and more self-conscious in the classroom, and that could certainly have a negative effect rather than a positive one on their teaching. So, in short, body cams in the classroom will make students and teachers feel uncomfortable. Instead of solving a small problem, it will create an enormous new one.
Unit 5. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Minor offences and punishment.
Acquit someone of charges. Ban someone from. Court. Designated. Non-designated. Disorderly conduct. Disturbance. Do community service. Impose a curfew. Issue someone with an on-the-spot fine. Judge. Littering. Make a prank call. Make a hoax call. One-off shoplifting. Repeated shoplifting. Parking ticket. Prosecute. Receive a suspended sentence. Settle a fine. Social worker. Supervise. Valid. Validate. Vandalism.
Unit 5. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Prepositional phrases.
By means of. In addition to. In a bid to. In aid of. In favour of. In order to. In touch with. Out of touch with. In response to. In the process of. On account of. On behalf of. On the strength of.
Unit 5. Check it. Vocabulary 3. More formal vocabulary.
Additionally. And yet. Arise. Collaborate with. Highly. Indeed. Make a formal apology. Matter. Merely. A number of. Numerous. Occasionally. Several. The vast majority of. Be willing to.
Unit 6. Vocabulary in context. Exercise 1.
Block of high-rise flats. Bungalow. Chalet. Cottage. Detached house. Luxury apartment. Semi-detached house. Terraced house. Villa.
Unit 6. Vocabulary in context. Exercise 2.
bill, deposit, dorm, dormitory, flat hunt, house hunt, flat share, house share, flatmate, fully furnished, halls of residence, homestay, host, landlord, landlady, lodger, move in.
Unit 6. Reading. Studying abroad next year. Time to think about where to live. 3 students share their experiences and tips. A. Jenny Harris, 17, Valencia.
You're going to study abroad for a year? Get ready for the time of your life. No, I know, in the first week it won't seem like that. You'll be feeling homesick and awkward, and you might even start thinking you've made the biggest mistake of your life moving to a new country where you don't know anyone. But if you choose a homestay, and if you're like me, after just 1 week, you'll be feeling you've been part of your host family your whole life. When I think back to my year abroad, what I remember most aren't the classes or what I learnt, but how at home I felt in a new culture. When I wanted to know how to get around the city on public transport, or how I should reply to certain questions without making a fool of myself, my host mum and her daughter, who became like a sister to me, helped me with everything I needed to know. In fact, I don't think I could have survived without them. There were some ground rules that I didn't particularly appreciate, like helping with the cooking and cleaning, unlike in my own home, or not allowing friends or guests to turn up at any hour. But we only had a few disagreements in all my time there, and we formed such a close connection that we're still in touch regularly. So if you're going abroad, choose a homestay so that you learn the language, but also all about the country's customs and culture. For example, you can find out the best markets to visit, how to avoid the expensive tourist traps, and on top of that, and importantly in my case, you're saving money because it's always going to be cheaper than renting a flat on your own.
B. Nate Parker, 16, Houston.
When I found out I was going to be studying abroad for a whole term, I confessed to feeling quite nervous about the situation. I was definitely a homebody, so I really wanted to stay with a host family. My study programme didn't have that option, so I found myself in a dorm on campus, much to my initial disappointment. How wrong can you be? I shared my room with a student from Mexico, and right from day one we became the best of friends, and I started to have the time of my life. I discovered I was more outgoing than I'd realised, and the experience taught me lots of new skills, like doing my own laundry. Sadly, cooking was not a skill I picked up, despite having a shared kitchen. In my defence, there was little need to prepare my own meals, since we had easy access to some great places to eat on campus. The rooms were fully furnished and well equipped, which meant I didn't need to pack much. At first, I thought the facilities would be pretty basic, but wrong again. We had all the mod cons, including high-tech laundry rooms, an on-site gym and even a cinema, all within easy walking distance. Obviously, you could go into the city centre when you liked, but the only thing holding you back was that you were so at home on campus that you didn't really feel like it. That did mean making more international than local friends, but that's also a key part of studying abroad, in my opinion. You certainly never felt alone, right from day one, since literally everyone was in the same boat. You're discovering a whole new way of life, but together, feeling the same doubts and fears, and the same thrills and excitement too.
C. Will Taylor, 25. Paris.
My first experience of living abroad was traumatic. I was in Paris as part of an Erasmus programme. I was young and I signed a very dodgy contract which virtually took away my standard rights as a tenant, leaving me feeling very bitter. Once I'd signed, the landlady informed me that there was a clause stating that I had to teach her 3 young children English. She threatened to kick me out of the flat if she wasn't satisfied with my lessons, despite never having taught before. She claimed she'd reduced the rent in return, not that I noticed. So I strongly suggest you check all the small print before signing anything. I also advise you not to put down a deposit on any flat based only on your online impressions. What appears to be a large, airy apartment can end up being a tiny little flat with no space at all. When the ancient sink fell right off my bathroom wall and crashed into pieces, my landlady accused me of breaking it on purpose and, initially at least, refused to repair it. So, if at all possible, go and see the place before handing over any money. I also recommend comparing the price of properties in the same area. Watch out for anything extreme on either side of the average rent. Location is, of course, incredibly important. If it takes ages to attend classes or socialise in the evening, think also about the cost and stress involved. Having said that, it was worth it. After a couple of months in my first flat, I learnt by trial and error and found a much better place. Living independently was ideal for me, and my flat was the perfect base for my frequent trips into the heart of an amazing city.
Unit 6. Listening. Exercises 2 and 3.
Today on our programme, we're talking about homelessness, a problem that's much more widespread than we may think. And we'll be homing in on various different projects to help solve this problem. Here to tell us more is journalist Desiree Roberts. Desiree, it's difficult to know how many homeless people there are in the world, isn't it?
Yes. The United Nations calculated in 2005 that 100 million people were homeless. That's worldwide. In the UK alone, a charity called Shelter calculated that around 320,000 people were homeless in 2019. And it's worth remembering that the problem affects young people in particular. Shelter says that about 180 children become homeless each day in the UK. A number of them run away from home because of some conflict there. Of course, without a job, they can't afford to rent a flat or anything, so they usually end up sleeping rough in all sorts of weather, or doing what's called sofa surfing, staying a couple of nights in somebody's house, sleeping on the sofa, and then moving on somewhere else. And of course, let's not forget that all around the world, refugees make up a particularly high number of the homeless too.
Now, in 2019, there was a huge worldwide event to raise awareness of homelessness, wasn't there?
That's right. It was called the Big Sleep Out, and it took place in over 50 cities around the world in a bid to raise awareness of the problem and raise money for homeless and refugee organisations. On the 7th of December, more than 50,000 people around the world spent the night sleeping outdoors as part of the event.
Did they? That many?
Yes, there were people in Times Square in New York, in Trafalgar Square in London, but also in Madrid, New Delhi, Hong Kong. The aim was to raise about £38 million in aid of charities working with homeless people and to help 1 million homeless people around the world. The money was split 50-50 between local and global charities.
So, what actually happened at the event?
Basically, people took sleeping bags and slept outdoors. In London, actor Helen Mirren read the crowd a bedtime story. The weather didn't help, though.
Didn't it? Why not?
It poured down. But that just helped people to realise what homeless people have to put up with most nights of the year. In Times Square, the actor Will Smith entertained the crowds. Of course, if you remember, Will Smith made a film called The Pursuit of Happiness, which was the true story of a man called Chris Gardner, who was homeless with his young son for about a year, but managed to turn his life around and become a successful businessman. Will Smith's son Jaden played the role of Gardner's son.
Believe it or not, I've never seen that film.
Haven't you? You should. It's very inspirational. I imagine that's the reason why Will Smith offered to help with the Big Sleep Out.
So, whose idea was the Big Sleep Out?
A Scottish man called Josh Littlejohn. The first Big Sleep Out event he organised took place in Edinburgh in 2016, with just 270 people sleeping outside. But by the next year, they already had 8,000. Littlejohn decided to stop after the World event in 2019. There's another organisation called Centrepoint, which still organises sleep-out events to help young people who are homeless.
That's good to hear. Josh Littlejohn is still very active, though, isn't he?
Yes, absolutely. Before the Big Sleep Out, he and Alice Thompson began a sandwich shop in Edinburgh, which has a social aim. Basically, they give away all the profits to social causes. It's called Social Bites. They have a chain of sandwich bars and a restaurant too. George Clooney heard about them and actually went in person to say hello to the staff once.
Did he? Brilliant.
Yeah, and Leonardo DiCaprio. What gave Alice and Josh the idea was seeing so many homeless people every day from their shop window. They felt they should serve them free food and hot drinks. Then one day, one homeless man asked for a job. They took him on, and within no time, they'd employed a number of people who'd been homeless. Thanks to the contact with these people, Alice and Josh became aware of the difficulties facing people on the street and realised they had to do more to help. I mean, everybody needs a helping hand at times, don't they?
Absolutely. Now, another interesting worldwide event is the Homeless World Cup, which has usually been held annually since 2003, hasn't it?
That's right. They normally have teams from around 50 countries taking part. The basic rule is that each player at the tournament is homeless or has been homeless at some point in the year before the competition. They usually play in teams of 4 on a shorter pitch than usual. And the matches have 2 halves of 7 minutes each. The idea is simple: to use the power of football to give people who are homeless a better life. By getting into football, homeless people can build friendships, become part of a team supporting and being supported by others in a similar situation. They learn the responsibility of being part of a team and having to turn up at each training session. It's very motivating when you find out that you're not alone. And, of course, just doing sport helps to give you strength and motivation. The people who started the Homeless World Cup did it because they considered football to be a universal language.
And that's what you need, I suppose, for a universal problem. Thanks, Desiree.
Unit 6. Grammar in Context 2. Pronunciation. Exercise 6B. 1,
I hadn't heard about the Homeless World Cup before.
Hadn't you?
2,
My friend Anna helps with a charity for homeless people.
Does she?
3,
Next week there'll be a sleep out in London.
Will there?
4,
You're totally wrong to think that.
Am I?
5,
Everybody likes Will Smith.
Do they?
6.
Nobody complained about the bad weather.
Didn't they?
7.
I couldn't find out any more information.
Couldn't you?
Unit 6. Developing speaking. Exercise 2.
It's hard to say. You could argue that it's a question of cultures. I mean, in some countries, the family has always been much closer, with stronger bonds and ties than in others. For instance, I'm Spanish, and it's very typical for people to stay at home until they're 30 or so, because, well, why would you live somewhere else when you could be with your parents and brother or sister in the house where you've always lived? I'm not convinced that it's the same in countries like the UK, where I have the impression that people prefer their freedom and independence. But I suppose there's always the danger that those are just stereotypical ideas about countries. Maybe each family is different.
What do you think, Maria?
Sergio, I agree with you when you say that it's a question of cultures. You just mentioned the importance of family in Spanish culture, and I think you're right. What's also true is that it may be a question of money too. In Spain, people would possibly move away from home earlier if they had some financial independence. However, these days, I believe most young people still depend on their parents for food and accommodation. Most young people have a practical reason to stay at home with their parents until they get a job that pays well or get married. But as you said, what's better than living with your own family, after all?
Unit 6. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Accommodation.
Bill. Block of high-rise flats. Bungalow. Chalet. Cottage. Deposit. Detached house. Dorm. Dormitory. Flat hunt. House hunt. Flat share. House share. Flatmate. Fully furnished. Halls of residence. Homestay. Host. Landlord. Landlady. Lodger. Luxury apartment. Move in. Semi-detached house. Terraced house. Villa.
Unit 6. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Idiomatic expressions with home and house.
Not be anything to write home about. Be home and dry. A home from home. Bring the house down. Bring it home to someone. Get on like a house on fire. Go round the houses. Home in on. Home truths. Make yourself at home.
Unit 6. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Describing cities and towns.
Atmospheric. Bohemian. Bustling. Cosmopolitan. Crowded. Fun. Hilly. Hip. historic, imposing, industrial, isolated, laid back, picturesque, renowned for, run down, shabby, spotless, sprawling, steeped in history, art, culture, stylish, thriving, touristy, tranquil, trendy, upmarket, vibrant, welcoming, well-connected.
Unit 7. Reading. What's real and what isn't? Welcome to the virtual influencers.
Parents are being warned of a fresh online threat to children from social media influencers who look real and post photos of themselves with other celebrities, but are in fact digital creations of the advertising industry. The rise of deep fakes and virtual influencers allows companies to easily manipulate young people and threatens to damage their well-being, according to Internet Matters, an online campaign designed to keep everyone under 18 safe on the internet. The campaign is backed by internet service providers and social media companies. Perhaps the most famous fake influencer is Lil Miquela, a virtual singer and model created by a US company who has 1.6 million followers on Instagram. There are all sorts of rumours about Lil Miquela. One theory is that she's a real singer who doesn't want to become famous and so hides behind an online persona. Another theory is that she has been created by someone in the music business who has suddenly realised that traditional singers and artists are losing popularity. What we do know for a fact is that a few years ago she was used by the fashion house Prada as a star of one of their seasonal shows in Milan, and that she was awarded the honour of appearing in the Time magazine list of the top 25 most influential people of the year, even though she isn't really a person. Nobody can deny that influencers are big business. Influencer DB, a company that supplies influencer management software, claimed that $5 billion was spent on Instagram influencer marketing in 2018. In that case, it seems to make sense to begin using virtual influencers instead of spending so much money on real people. Thanks to improvements in 3D imaging, it has become much cheaper and easier in recent times to create digital influencers. And it goes without saying that CGI influencers don't need to have their hair done or to get expensive professionals to do their makeup either. Not to mention the fact that they don't make mistakes or create problems for their bosses. The deciding factor for advertisers, though, is that they bring something that real influencers have already lost, and that advertising companies always need: novelty value. They really do offer something original that can capture the public's attention. The virtual influencer gives brands and corporations the ability to create posts that feature perfect boys and girls who can speak to a large young audience at the click of a button, said psychologist Dr. Linda Papadopoulos, an ambassador for Internet Matters. This potentially allows companies to easily manipulate young people by using live data to create the most influential series of images. The virtual influencers sometimes describe themselves as robots, but also act as if they were human, what the industry calls mixed reality. Lil Miquela wrote recently, "I keep a Spotify list of stuff I'm listening to, but outside of that, I've been really into Ski Mask and Nina Kravitz. I found a cool remix of that new Lizzo song I really liked the other day. But yeah, the new Billie Eilish and Slater songs are on repeat too. Her Instagram posts show her posing with real musicians backstage. This in-between thing can be very difficult for children, Papadopoulos said. A child needs role models, but these role models are being created by marketeers. They aren't real and create nothing but attention-seeking. They are grabbing attention, and for what? They are not there to educate and empower. They are there to engage, and they do that by making us feel afraid, angry, and insecure. The biggest thing we can do for our kids is get them to think critically, to ask, am I being influenced by an individual or a group, and why? Peter Fonagy, the chief executive of the Anna Freud Centre for Child Mental Health, said fake influencers were an example of computers being used to mimic a deep psychological process which allows people to trust others. They can recreate the feeling of being recognised. The problem is that AI can mimic this process, said Fonagy. You can program it so that the optimal number of people feel that this voice can be trusted. I am not trying to create a moral panic, but it is important we are aware computers can mimic some important aspects of what the human brain has evolved to be able to detect. Advertising industry sources said that within 2 or 3 years, artificial intelligence would allow virtual influencers to generate their own fresh Instagram posts, using machine learning to analyse data about followers and work out how best to manipulate them. In the UK, fashion photographer Cameron James Wilson has already created a team of virtual models, which have been used to promote smart cars, LS and KFC. There are some virtual influencers that aren't showcasing that these models aren't real, and I find that quite worrying, he said. If you are liking and following an account and you don't know who is behind it, you could be following someone with completely different views.
Unit 7. Listening. Exercises 2 and 3.
Chocolate. It's an advertiser's dream because it's so easy to sell. As a luxury gift item, a great treat for kids, a gourmet product for foodies, or in its darkest form as an organic health product full of powerful antioxidants. And it's unique amongst all types of food because it's said to be the only one that actually melts at the same temperature as our bodies, at around 37 degrees Celsius. But not everything about chocolate is great. Here to tell us about chocolate's dark side is food journalist Nicole Turner. Nicole, can you begin by telling us a bit about the history of chocolate?
Hello, Jim. Let's see. Chocolate, as we all know, comes from cocoa beans. It's thought that cocoa was first cultivated over 3,000 years ago by the Mayans in Mesoamerica, where Mexico and Central America are today. The word chocolate is known to have come from the Mayan word chocolatl, which means bitter water. In fact, in Mayan times, cocoa beans were used as a form of currency. And when chocolate arrived in Europe in 1585, it gradually became a great success, to the extent that today it's thought that about half of the world's chocolate is consumed there, with people eating about 11 kilos a year on average.
Its success is part of the problem today, though, isn't it?
That's right. We're thought to consume close to 3 million tonnes of chocolate and other cocoa products annually. But every year, global demand goes up by about 2 to 5%. That's having unfortunate consequences for our planet.
How come?
Basically, the popularity of cocoa and chocolate is responsible for the destruction of large areas of rainforest, particularly in West and Central Africa, where up to 70% of the world's cocoa is grown. There are about 2 million farmers cultivating cocoa. Ghana and Ivory Coast are the top 2 producers in the world, with Ivory Coast in the top spot. In fact, Ivory Coast is thought to produce up to 40% of the world's cocoa. But to do that, The rainforest there has been reduced by more than 80% since 1960. Less than 4% of the country is covered in rainforest today. But in the past, a quarter of the country was said to have been rainforest. A few years ago, it was claimed by an environmental group called Mighty Earth that if the present demand continues, there may not be any more forests left in Ivory Coast by 2030. Some of those areas are the natural habitat of chimpanzees and great apes, so animals are being affected too.
I see. Now, I believe that one of the problems is that many of the cocoa plantations have been created illegally within national parks or protected forest areas. Large areas of forest land have been cut down without permission to clear the land and start these plantations.
That's right. The cocoa beans that are grown illegally there are known as dirty beans. What happens is that these dirty beans are sold to intermediaries who sell them to traders. The traders sell them to big cocoa supply companies, who then sell them to the giants of the chocolate industry, who just don't know where the beans originally came from. The problem is that through this chain, the dirty beans are mixed in with the clean beans, the ones that are legally grown. So at the end of the day, when you eat your favourite chocolate bar or product, it's quite possible that it contains chocolate from illegally grown beans.
How can this be happening?
Well, it's been suggested that some officials are receiving money from these illegal plantations and allowing them to grow on land that in theory is protected. And of course, some of the intermediaries who are buying and selling the beans don't really care where the beans are from. They're just interested in making a big profit as fast as they can. But that's precisely the problem. Cocoa beans are big business right now, but if this way of working doesn't change soon, the business won't last for long. By cutting down the existing trees, there's no shade for the cocoa plants, and conditions will become hotter and drier, making it much more difficult for the cocoa plants to grow. One specific thing the big chocolate companies could do to help is to agree to only buy cocoa grown in the shade, but so far at least they haven't done that. Sadly, it's been calculated that it could take about 10 years for one of the main forests to grow back to its former size.
I imagine cocoa is vital for a large part of the country's economy, isn't it?
That's right. Although another sad fact is that the actual farmers themselves don't get rich from the cocoa they produce. It's been claimed that they can't even afford what for us has become a basic pleasure, a bar of chocolate.
We all love chocolate, but I think it's important that we know where our food comes from and we do what we can to help make sure all companies, producers and farmers respect the environment. What you've told us today is certainly food for thought, Nicole. Thanks.
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 3.
Now, I'd like you to talk about something together. Here are some different techniques that advertisers use to persuade us to buy things. Look at the techniques and talk to each other about how effective you think the different techniques are.
OK, so what do you think about fear as an advertising technique?
Well, I think it's used a lot. I suppose that fear is a strong emotion, so it's quite an effective technique. You know, if you think that you can be saved from a serious problem by a particular product or service, then you're probably going to want to buy it.
It's interesting, though, because fear is also a negative emotion, so maybe it puts you off buying something. That's why I think comedy is such an effective advertising technique. You know, you always remember funny adverts, don't you?
That's true. And maybe that's why adverts that promise you happiness are very effective too. I mean, we probably don't think about it when we watch the actual adverts, but that sensation of a perfect world is often present in adverts, and I really do feel it has some sort of effect on us.
Yes, you're right. And maybe that's connected with the idea of status too. It seems as if people who have product X are happier than those with product Y, and you don't want to be left out.
Yes, you feel that you have to have the same as everyone else. And what about scarcity?
Personally, I think it's very effective because, again, you don't want to miss out on something and be the only person without it.
Yes, you see lots of adverts saying limited edition nowadays, and it helps you to make up your mind to buy something quickly before they run out of it.
Thank you.
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5.
Now you have about a minute to decide which 2 techniques are the most persuasive.
So, what do you reckon? Personally, I think that promising happiness is one of the most persuasive techniques because we all want to be happy. It's what we all consciously or unconsciously aim for.
I suppose so. But I'm not sure if we believe that happy world in adverts anymore. It seems very artificial when you see the perfect family all sitting around the dinner table, having a perfect meal in a perfect house. I think comedy is maybe the most effective because we all love to laugh.
That's true. But the problem with funny ads is that I remember the situation, I remember the jokes, but I don't remember the product. It seems to me that the advert becomes more important than the product, and that's not very effective.
Yes, you're probably right. What about scarcity then? I think that it works with me. If I see something I like and it says limited edition, I tend to buy it.
Me too. I know that it's often not necessarily true, but if I see there's only one item left, it encourages me to buy it, definitely.
So, what else shall we choose?
Maybe status? I mean, that's definitely effective with smartphones and technology.
I know what you mean. Everybody wants to have the latest gadget, even if it's not really much better than the one you've already got.
True. We do often buy things just as a status symbol, and adverts often make us do that.
Thank you.
Unit 7. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Advertising and selling.
Ad, advert, advertisement. Banner, billboard. Brand loyalty, brand name. Brochure, endorse. Flyer, free sample. Freebie, influencer. Launch a marketing campaign. Leaflet, logo. Make cold calls. Manipulate. Pop-up. Product placement. Promote. Slogan. Word-of-mouth publicity.
Unit 7. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Word formation. Prefixes and suffixes. Adjective suffixes.
Childish. Collectible. Creative. Indecisive. Ineffective. Inescapable. Pointless. Responsible. Sensible. Supportive. Tallish.
Adverb suffixes.
Dramatically. Illegally. Increasingly. Theoretically. Undeniably. Unfortunately.
Verb prefixes and suffixes.
Ensure. Intensify. Modernize. Strengthen.
Noun suffixes.
Censorship. Criticism. Description. Endorsement. Inability. Interaction. Likelihood. Overconfidence. Perfection. Solution. Thoughtfulness. Variety.
Prefixes.
Antisocial. Illegally. Inability. Indecisive. Ineffective. Inescapable. Interaction. Multipurpose. Overconfidence. Overthink. Preseason. Uncertain. Undeniably. Unfortunately.
Unit 7. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Describing clothes and fashion.
80s, 90s, noughties. Accessory. Affordable. Baggy. Bold. Casual. Check. Chic. Classic. Cute. Designer label. Unfashionable. Fast fashion. Fit. Floppy hat. Flowery. Glamorous. Hand-me-down. Have an eye for. Look good on. Loose. Loud. Match. Mix and match. Not be seen dead in. Old-fashioned. Outfit. Oversized. Patterned. Plain. Scruffy. Second-hand. Slave to fashion. Smart. Sophisticated. Stand out from the crowd. Stripy. Stylish. Suit. Sustainable. Sweatshop. Tight. Timeless. Vintage.
Unit 8. Reading. Swimming with icebergs.
The southern winter was approaching. From Lewis Pugh's boat, you could look down and see grey ice thickening the waves. A fast wind off the ice shelf meant the air temperature was a mind-blowing minus 37 degrees Celsius. It was so fantastically cold that, having gone out in a Zodiac to check the water for killer whales, Pugh's wife didn't actually get wet when a wave crashed over the dinghy. "I saw the water come out and, in the air, I saw it turn into ice," Pugh says. When the Zodiac came back, it was the heart-stopping moment for Pugh to do what he'd come to do. Having taken off his outer layer, he jumped into the water from a piece of floating ice, wearing just swimming trunks and a swimming cap. Pausing for a second to put on his goggles, Pugh felt the thick water rip them off. It was cold enough to freeze his eyeballs, but the goggles were gone, and there was no time to get others, so he started swimming. The idea was to swim a kilometre, but immediately he could see the water freezing on his arms as he lifted them for each stroke. At 250 metres, he saw that 2 knuckles on his left hand were white, frozen. I get to 330 metres, and I realise if I carry on any longer, I'm actually going to lose my hands right here. Pulled aboard by a support crew, he managed to get into the Zodiac. He had to be lifted gently to minimise the damage to his frozen fingers. A duvet was thrown over him as the dinghy raced to the mothership. It took the best part of an hour in a hot shower to get his core body temperature back to normal. Known as the human polar bear, a week later, Pugh looks okay, but tired. I ask if he's confident that the polar swimming, which he does at nail-biting risk to his life to draw attention to the steady destruction of the world's wild places, hasn't done him permanent damage. "No," he says. "I try not to think about it." What is quickly clear when you meet Pugh is that he doesn't do this stuff because it's exciting. "I have no death wish. I take these risks because of life, because I want to protect life, because I care about these things." Pugh says there are 2 misunderstandings about him. One is that he's somehow superhuman. The other is that he enjoys cold water. Anybody who's been cold and says they enjoy the cold, well, they haven't really been cold. Real cold is like an ice cream headache all over, he says, and that's just the beginning. The longer you stay in water that is nearly freezing, the more of your body nearly freezes. The blood rushes to your core to protect your vital organs, but fingers, arms, and legs lose feeling and function. The Lancet has published an eye-opening study of Pugh's physiology, in which it listed the clinical conditions that being in very cold water can bring on in seconds in normal people. Pugh is one of very few people in history to have shown that mind can beat matter, even in polar waters. What protects him against the cold is a weird physiological thing. When he stands in the freezing wind in his swimming trunks, his core temperature goes up. His doctors have measured it and given it a name: anticipatory thermogenesis. The theory that it is unique to Pugh is apparently false. His doctors say this useful internal warming is acquired, not innate. They think the cause is that I've spent so many years swimming in extreme cold water that I know subconsciously if I don't heat up my core before I get in, I simply won't survive. And so, getting into the water, I'm sweating and I'm thirsty. One result is that he has to drink a lot before swimming, and we're talking water, not hot tea. But he is not immune from the symptoms of hypothermia. They hit him later, in the shower, when the warm blood near his heart is used to warm up his legs from the inside and comes back thoroughly chilled. His first long, cold swim was 12 years ago, round the North Cape in the Arctic Ocean. He returned to the Arctic each year after that for 4 years, swimming a kilometre across the North Pole in 2007 to show the world that there was no ice there anymore. He has since cheated death in a glacial lake 2/3 of the way up Mount Everest, nearly drowning on his first attempt to cross it because he set out too fast at breakneck speed, forgetting about the altitude. His 5 Antarctic swims last month were intended to persuade nations to back his call for a giant marine protected area, MPA, encompassing the entire Ross Sea. Pew calls this giant area of ice and ocean the world's last pristine marine ecosystem.
Unit 8. Listening. Exercise 2. Speaker 1.
Well, when I was younger, I used to go almost every weekend to a lake not far from my house with my 2 older cousins. We'd take our fishing stuff and spend the whole day there. The fishing was just an excuse to hang out together outdoors, really. Anyway, I hadn't been there for ages, and my friend Mike had just called to tell me he couldn't go climbing with me that weekend. So I just decided then and there to revisit the lake. No fishing stuff, no food, but to have a dip in the water, which I must say was really cold. But it was a hot day, and I'd been studying hard all week for my final exams, so almost an hour of fairly energetic, intense physical activity took my mind completely off history and physics and had a calming effect that I really needed. It's funny because I hadn't done anything like that for a while, and I thought it would make me really tired, but it was the opposite.
Speaker 2.
I'm not very sporty, really. In fact, it's fair to say I prefer reading about physical exercise rather than actually doing it. But my uncle persuaded me to go with him last weekend to an amazing place I'd heard about but never visited. My uncle is a great climber and he's always wanted to get me to follow in his footsteps, but he knows by now that I find heights terrifying. But this was a bit different because when you go underground, it's weird, but you don't really think about vertigo or anything like that. At least I didn't. We kept going down and down and finally came to a small but beautiful lake, which even had small fish in it. The whole experience was eye-opening. I learned about glaciers, rocks, stalactites, and lots of other stuff. That was the best part of it, definitely. I was disappointed when it was time to get back up to the surface again.
Speaker 3.
I wouldn't have said I was brave. Just the opposite. That's why I still find it hard to believe I did what I did last weekend. You see, my very best friend was celebrating her birthday and wanted me to do something crazy with her. So that's how I suddenly found myself in a hair-raising situation with her, up in the air, looking down at the ground. I spotted a lake below us, and I thought at that moment, I hope we don't land in it because I can't swim. When the time came to jump, it was the point of no return, and we just did it. We were laughing so much, which I remember at the time thinking was an unusual thing to do, maybe. But by the time we got to the ground, let me tell you, everything was different. It may sound unusual, silly even, but I realised if I could do this, I could do anything. I honestly feel like a new person.
Speaker 4.
I knew what all of my friends were thinking last weekend. They were thinking, if he can do all those tricks that he usually does, he's going to be great at this too. But I was really frightened at first, terrified even. One thing is doing that stuff in the streets or the park, and another thing up on a mountain with the snow and ice. To be honest, I'd never been up to the mountains much before, so that was an unusual experience for me and a bit of a learning curve. But yeah, I shouldn't have worried. Sure, I fell over time and again, but it was such great fun. There were a few hair-raising moments when I lost control on the steep slopes, but I think I might end up changing sports. I had such an amazing time. Just being there was great, and next Saturday I'm going to have a go at climbing with one of my friends. He's already teaching me some useful tips.
Speaker 5.
It's fair to say that I'm already mad about my new hobby now. It was my older brother who got me into it, and recently we've been going most weekends. To be honest, I usually find it quite exhausting, but there's nothing like that feeling of finally managing to reach the top. Last weekend, we decided we were going somewhere new because we'd been told there was an amazing view of the lakes when you get up high, right at the summit. So, after all of our great expectations, we felt really down in the end because the weather was poor and we couldn't see anything. Everyone says it would have been stunning if we'd had a clear sky, but the whole thing was soul-destroying, really, after being so excited beforehand. Still, we'll probably go again soon and see if we're luckier. We should have checked the weather before leaving, of course. Oh well, you live and learn. That's what they say, at least.
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercise 3.
Elisa, it's your turn first. Here are your photos. They show people doing dangerous activities. Compare 2 of the photos and say why people might want to do these activities and what risks the people might be taking.
Okay, let me see. In this photo, there are a lot of people and they seem really scared. I think they're probably really high up and either about to fall or falling already. In this other photo, there are far fewer people. They're in the sea, in a cage, and it looks like they have special equipment to be able to breathe there and maybe to film what they can see. There are some fish around them, but of course, by far the most important thing in the photo is the shark, which seems to be interested in the people in the cage. I think activities like swimming with sharks are becoming more and more popular because it isn't the same seeing these animals on TV as seeing them face to face. And as for the theme park photo, I think it's clear people want to do things like this because of the, what do you call it? The adrenaline. They're probably excited and maybe a little scared. I mean, it's a great deal more exciting than sitting at home. I guess there are risks with both activities. I suppose something could go wrong with the theme park ride, although I imagine that's not very likely because they have to check it all the time. But maybe falling so fast could be bad for your back or neck, or maybe even for your heart. And as for swimming with sharks, that cage doesn't look completely safe to me. If the shark was angry or hungry, I wonder if it could damage the cage.
Thank you. Pablo, which of these situations do you think is the riskiest?
Let me think about that for a second. Personally, I think it's considerably more dangerous to go in that cage than to do either of the other 2 activities. What I mean is, you can control the theme park ride because it's specially designed. And even doing those jumps in parkour, you're in control of the situation. But those activities aren't nearly so dangerous as swimming with sharks because you just can't control nature. The sharks and even the movement of the sea are unpredictable. And there are other risks with being under the water. I mean, the deeper you go, the riskier it is. Or, for example, maybe the people have significantly less oxygen left in their tanks than they think. That's another risk they're taking. So I'd say that's easily the riskiest situation.
Unit 8. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Compound adjectives with parts of the body.
Breakneck. Ear-splitting. Eye-catching. Eye-opening. Hair-raising. Heart-stopping. Heartwarming. Mind-blowing. Nail-biting. Soul-destroying.
Unit 8. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Words with more than one meaning.
Account. Break. Catch. Clear. Cover. Draw. Fair. Hard. Last. Pick up. Point. Since. Spot. Take something into account. Tip. Get to the point. Miss the point. On the point of. Prove a point. Score a point. See a point. Up to a point.
Unit 8. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Metaphors. Happiness and sadness.
Brighten up. Cast a shadow over. Down in the dumps. Feel blue. Feel down. Feel low. In low spirits. In seventh heaven. Lift somebody's spirits. Light at the end of the tunnel. Light up. Look up. Look gloomy. Look bleak. On cloud 9. On top of the world. Over the moon. Somebody's heart sinks. Walk on air. Float on air.
Unit 9. Reading. By May, I'd made over £1,000.
The pandemic has made life difficult for teenagers who want to earn some cash. Most of the weekend jobs in retail and hospitality they would traditionally have looked for have fallen by the wayside. Meanwhile, babysitting is less frequent as parents have fewer opportunities to leave the house. Rising to this challenge is a new generation of teen entrepreneurs who have set up their own businesses. We spoke to some to find out how the pandemic had spurred them to go it alone.
A. Lawrence Moss.
When 16-year-old Lawrence Moss heard that his exams had been cancelled as a result of the COVID crisis, he decided to throw himself into the social media marketing business he began 2 years ago. After working several hours a day during lockdown, he is on target to hit £20,000 in revenue this year. Moss's business, Greedy Growth, grew out of a hobby he began when he was 13, curating content he found on Instagram. I had pages about motorbikes, travel, cars, cats and dogs. I gathered viral content and pushed it onto the pages. It was purely for the fun of it, he says. While his peers were playing Fortnite, Lawrence found himself being approached by brands that wanted to buy sponsored posts to reach the 350,000 followers he had built up in his Instagram communities. Rather than settling for earning the occasional £100 here and there, Lawrence decided to launch his own company to offer Instagram-specific marketing services. He offers advice to firms that want to increase their reach on the platform. At the age of 14, he launched Greedy Growth's website and began earning a few £100s a month, paid into his personal bank account. About a year later, at the end of 2019, he was earning £500 to £1,000 a month. Now back at school studying A-level philosophy, maths, history and economics, the majority of his earnings are reinvested into the business, meaning he has not profited enough to pay tax. Although he may occasionally splash out on a pair of shoes, he says, "I spend money as if I don't have a lot of it, and I would never tell my friends the amount of money I'm making."
B. Sydney and Ozzie O'Neill.
Brothers Sydney, 17, and Ozzie O'Neill, 15, from Brighton, began designing and making T-shirts when the work they had planned for over the summer dried up. "I was supposed to have paid work experience, but it fell through," Sydney says. "It is a lot harder to get jobs these days, so it was definitely motivation to start something ourselves." After months of boredom during lockdown, the pair decided to turn their doodles into a business. "I showed a design to a mate, and he said, 'That would look really good on a T-shirt.' I went onto YouTube and looked at making T-shirts at home. It seemed really easy," Sydney says. In August, the brothers started selling T-shirts, printed with 3 designs. A monkey on a skateboard was the central brand concept. Using £100 saved from birthdays, pocket money, babysitting and selling clothes, they bought 40 plain T-shirts for £80 and spent £20 on packaging, shipping stickers, etc. Next, they borrowed a heat press from a friend, set up Instagram and Facebook pages and a Shopify website, charging £20 for each T-shirt and an additional £1.99 for shipping. To create a buzz, they offered discounts on social media, working closely with local skaters. The stock sold out within a month, creating a profit of £500. "The money goes straight into my bank account, and then I move half to my brother's account," Sydney says. The boys, who are now back at school doing A-levels and GCSEs, plan to spend about £175 on more T-shirts. "Now we have got a lot of schoolwork, it is a really good way to passively earn money, as it only takes 20 to 40 seconds to press a T-shirt, and the post office is 30 seconds down the road."
C. Olivia Bassett.
Spotting a gap in the market, 17-year-old Olivia Bassett started selling affordable fleece toys for dogs in August. Since then, she has made and sold more than 75, making more than £230 profit. "I have been a dog trainer all my life," says Olivia, who has 4 dogs of her own. "We go to shows and I was always looking at the dog toys and the ridiculous prices. I thought there was no need for them to be so expensive." At the beginning of March, Olivia decided to try to make her own toys, researching the process on YouTube. "Fleece is really good because the toys don't snap, they stretch," she says. Olivia sourced fleece from her local market in Birmingham and soon found interest from other dog trainers. With 1 £5 metre of fleece, she can make 3 long toys. "I set up a Facebook group and started selling them in mid-August. I also started advertising on different pet Facebook groups and went to dog club events to sell directly." Olivia makes 5 varieties of toys, ranging from £2.50 to £8 plus shipping, and accepts payments via PayPal or cash. The toys can be made to order, allowing clients to specify the colours. Now in her second year of A-levels, studying biology, chemistry and psychology, Olivia is able to fit her business around her schoolwork. I make the toys while watching TV, or even while I'm having an online college lesson from home. They take between 10 and 45 minutes to make, depending on the design. She hopes orders will grow as she continues to save for driving lessons. I haven't got any work experience, which makes it harder to find a job, and anyway, there aren't any jobs going in my area.
Unit 9. Listening. Exercises 2 and 3.
Today we're looking at something that strikes nearly everyone with fear: their first interview. It may be for a place at a college or university, for an internship, an apprenticeship, or a part-time or full-time job. Whatever it's for, even the most self-confident people get nervous about interviews. So, here to give us some advice and encouragement is Amanda Watts. Amanda, what can you do to make sure you feel confident on the day of your interview?
In my opinion, preparation is really the key to making sure you're successful in an interview. It's really important not to go along to the interview without preparing for it before. To do a really good interview, first of all, you need to know what type of interview it's going to be, because not all interviews are the same. Maybe it's a panel interview where there's more than one interviewer. That can be scary for some people, to see more than one interviewer there if they're not expecting it. Or maybe there's only one interviewer, but more than one person being interviewed because the interviewer wants to see how you interact with other people, either to see your ability as a team leader or to see if you can be a team player, working as part of a larger group of people. Or maybe the interview isn't really an interview at all. Maybe it's a test that you could prepare for the day before.
OK, but can't it be difficult to find out what type of interview you're going to have?
Often the email that invites you for the interview will tell you what type of interview it's going to be. So it's a good idea never to delete the email. But in any case, don't be afraid to contact them before the date of the interview and ask them.
Aren't there other things you can do?
Of course. For example, make sure you do your homework by finding out as much as you can about the company or university you are applying to and the particular job or course that you're applying for. In your interview, you need to show that you know about the company or university and that you're really interested in them. For instance, if it's a job application, most companies will send you a job description and maybe a person specification too.
A person specification? What's that?
That will tell you what sort of person they're looking for, what experience and personal qualities are important for the job. Use that information to predict what questions they'll ask you. Prepare your answers to those questions and make sure you're ready to talk about your skills and strengths and your weaknesses, because they're sure to ask you about those too.
Isn't it better to say you don't have any?
Never admitting that you have weaknesses can make you look arrogant. Tell the truth, but say what positive steps you're taking to overcome your weaknesses. That way you can show that you're constructive. Oh, by the way, another thing you should study before the interview is your own CV and application form. You'd be surprised how often people forget their answers. Then in the interview, they say something completely different. That creates a really bad impression, as you can imagine.
Yes, I can. OK, so you've done all this preparation. That means you'll probably go along to the interview feeling a lot more confident. But isn't it natural to still feel nervous on the day of the interview?
It's not only natural, it can be positive too. Not feeling nervous could lead to problems because a few nerves help you to be alert and concentrate and create a good impression. But if you do find that your nerves are really taking control, take deep breaths. That's a classic relaxation technique that always works. One thing that can help you to stay calm is remembering that an interview is to find out if you're right for the job or course, but also to find out if the job or course is right for you. And after all, they're probably really hoping that you're the person they're trying to find.
Good point. Now, personally, one interview question that always makes me nervous is when they ask me where I see myself in the future. Don't you think that's a hard question to answer?
The problem is that you should avoid being too ambitious, but at the same time, you should avoid not seeming ambitious at all. To be honest, I think that this is the typical question that you have to prepare before the interview. Imagine that you get the job you're applying for. What would be the next logical step up from that job in the company? What would you need to learn, or what qualities would be desirable to make that next step? Give an answer where you show you would have learnt those skills and abilities.
OK. And my last question. What if you've done something bad or negative in the past and they ask you about it in the interview?
Be honest. In the end, the truth usually comes out. If there's something negative that you've done or that's happened to you, just explain what positive things you've learnt from the negative experience. Show that you've moved on and made progress since then.
Sounds like good advice. Amanda, many thanks.
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 3.
Now I'd like you to talk about something together. Here are 5 different professions. Look at the professions and talk to each other about how satisfying you think each one is.
OK, so I think that being an artist would normally be a satisfying job because in most cases it involves doing something you love.
I agree, and it's also creative. I think that's important when it comes to job satisfaction. It must be great to produce something that no one else has done before, and I think it beats a typical 9-to-5 job.
That's true. So what about being a doctor?
I think that must be satisfying too, in the sense that you have a lot of responsibility because other people's lives depend on you.
I agree, but that's a lot of pressure. And I think, to a great extent, doctors have to work long hours.
I agree, but it is worthwhile because you're helping other people, so that makes it satisfying. Plus, by and large, it's well paid.
True. Being an aid worker must be really satisfying too, knowing that you're helping people in real need.
Yes, I think you're right. OK, what about being an entrepreneur? Broadly speaking, I can imagine it's great to have your own business and not having anyone to tell you what to do.
Right. And you know that if you work hard, then you benefit.
OK, so the last one. A journalist. What do you think about that?
I think it must be very satisfying. On the whole, I imagine your normal working week is incredibly varied. You could be interviewing a politician 1 minute and then a celebrity the next.
I agree. And it probably offers chances to travel. I think it would provide a lot of job satisfaction.
Thank you.
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5.
Now you have to decide which 2 jobs you think are the most satisfying.
So, what do you reckon? Personally, I think that being an artist must be one of the most satisfying because you're really doing what you want to do. That must feel amazing.
But isn't it more satisfying to help others?
Well, to a great extent that's true, but isn't it true that artists help others with their work as well? They make you feel happy or make you think, or just help you to enjoy and appreciate life.
Yes, you've got a point. I hadn't thought about that. But what about aid workers? Knowing that you're making a difference to people who really need help to survive must give you an incredible feeling of satisfaction, don't you think?
Yes, It must be an amazing feeling to know that you're really making a difference to people's lives.
Actually, I also think being an entrepreneur must be satisfying too, because you're probably helping to create jobs for other people and inventing products that people really need.
Wouldn't you say that entrepreneurs and artists are similar in that way?
I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean exactly?
Well, they're both creating new things, producing something unique that only they have thought about. That must be the most satisfying thing about any job, in my opinion.
Maybe you're right. So, what shall we decide? How about aid workers and entrepreneurs?
Yes, OK, I agree.
Thank you.
Unit 9. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Life and career developments.
Accomplish feats. Become financially independent. End up. Find your feet. Follow in somebody's footsteps. Get on in life. Give somebody valuable insight into. Have drive and ambition. Make your own way in life. Never look back. Overcome setbacks. Put something on hold. Serve an apprenticeship. Settle in. Take up. Tricks of the trade. Try your hand at something.
Unit 9. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Verb-noun collocations.
Embark on a career. Embark on a course. Embark on a project. Embark on a venture. Experience adversity. Experience change. Experience fear. Experience an obstacle. Experience pain. Experience problems. Experience resistance. Experience a setback. Experience a situation. Experience a shock. Experience a surprise. Gain confidence. Gain experience. Gain insight. Gain knowledge. Gain a qualification. Gain understanding. Overcome adversity. Overcome change. Overcome fear. Overcome an obstacle. Overcome pain. Overcome a problem. Overcome resistance. Overcome a setback. Overcome a situation. Take up a career. Take up a hobby. Take up a position. Take up a post. Undertake an analysis. Undertake an investigation. Undertake a study. Undertake a survey. Undertake a task.
Other collocations.
Cause trouble. Inspire confidence. Pay attention. Speak your mind. Suffer a setback. Voice an opinion. Weigh up the consequences. Weigh up the pros and cons.
Unit 9. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Starting out, in work and life.
Applicant. Break into the job market. Climb the first rung on the career ladder. Cover expenses. Get a foot in the door. Hit the ground running. Intern. Internship. Minimum wage. Networking. Recruit. Referee. Stepping stone. Work placement.
Unit 10. Vocabulary in context. Exercise 2.
Avoid jargon. Be on the same page. Convey a message. Find something puzzling. Get the wrong end of the stick. Make a gaffe. Make a witty remark. Misinterpret. Take something literally. Talk at cross purposes. Understand nuances.
Unit 10. Reading. Saluton. The surprise return of Esperanto.
In the village of Barlaston, just outside Stoke-on-Trent, a strange language can be heard. A Tudor house here is home to the Esperanto Association of Britain, EAB, which encourages people to learn the constructed language. Esperanto summer schools were first established in Stoke in 1960. The concept of an easy-to-learn, universal second tongue was energetically promoted, drawing prominent speakers to the area, and the city still bears traces of its Esperanto history. In the northeast of the city, a row of terraced houses are located on Zamenhof Grove, named after the inventor of Esperanto, L.L. Zamenhof. The inner idea of Esperanto, Zamenhof once said, was to promote world peace. A doctor, born in 1859 in Białystok, now in Poland, Zamenhof grew up at a time when violence between different groups was common. While still a child, Zamenhof hit upon the idea that a constructed second language that was easy to learn and understand would allow people to talk as peers, rather than fight. In 1887, after tinkering away for more than 10 years, Zamenhof published his ideas in a pamphlet. By 1905, the fundamental rules of Esperanto had been established by a conference of speakers in France, and Esperantist groups began popping up across the world. Tim Owen, Education Director for the EAB, gives me a crash course in what makes it straightforward. Probably the main factor is that you can acquire a huge vocabulary without knowing so many words, he says. All words ending O are nouns. An A ending is for an adjective, while E denotes an adverb. He shows me that, for instance, vidi, meaning to see, can become vido for vision, vida for visual, and vide for visually, concepts that require different words in English. If you need to find an opposite, you can add the mal prefix. Pura is clean, malpura is dirty. These building blocks can help speakers learn new words very quickly. The spellings are phonetic. There are no grammatical genders, verbs are strictly regular, and the vocabulary is a blend of European languages familiar to many. The Esperanto course, on a popular language learning app, recently reached 1 million learners worldwide. There's a dizzying array of other online options to help would-be learners too. A few taps on the Amikumu, or Do the Friendly Thing app, shows users local Esperantists to chat with, while numerous Facebook groups help beginners with vocab and grammar. Esperanto may have been the brainchild of a Polish doctor in the 19th century, but it has adapted for the 21st. Simone Davis, a civil servant, began learning Esperanto online to distract her from painful chronic health conditions. She found that even at her most tired or ill, she could manage a lesson on her tablet. One lesson easily becomes 2 or 3, and before I knew it, I was hooked, she says. In just over a year, she learned more Esperanto than she has French, despite taking French classes for 5 years. It's the values underpinning the language, as well as its ease, that drew Davis in. Esperanto is a symbol of intentional goodwill towards others, she says. Learning the language isn't just a hobby, but a commitment to making connections across borders on a level playing field. I initially write this off as simply a nice sentiment, but there's plenty of practice behind the principle. Odun shows me the Passporta Servo, a pocket-sized directory of Esperantists all around the world. They offer fellow speakers a place to stay in their home country, often completely free of charge. The Passporta Servo led 26-year-old James McMurray, a data engineer, to make learning Esperanto his New Year's resolution several years ago. He had first become familiar with the language while leafing through his grandfather's books. He had become an Esperantist while stationed in India during the Second World War. I remember growing up and seeing his books in Esperanto, without being able to understand it, and his correspondence with people all over the world who may not speak English and be able to communicate, McMurray says. Despite the resolutely internationalist spirit of Esperanto, it's hard to imagine global business being conducted with a cheery saluton. Some utopian-minded speakers say its day as a lingua franca will come. Esperanto means one who hopes in the language, but most acknowledge that this is unlikely. Mostly, it's the omnipresence of English that explains why Esperanto isn't the current go-to for international communication. Esperanto is neutral because it is not a national language, but that also means it does not have a state backing its use abroad. People having to make a choice will see English as the financially better option, says 19-year-old Sammy Kennedy, an aspiring photographer. However, Esperanto gives you things that English will never be able to give you, such as a sense of belonging. He credits the accepting and caring Esperanto-speaking community with helping him to overcome loneliness and bullying. Whether to learn a national language or a constructed one is a debate Kennedy has had with others. But one piece of advice from another Esperanto speaker stayed with him. Learn English if you want to make money. Learn Esperanto if you want to make friends. It's one of the truest things I've ever heard, he says.
Unit 10. Listening. Exercises 2 and 3.
Sometime in the past, it seemed that being bilingual was potentially problematic. The feeling was that young children would suffer from trying to cope with 2 languages. But nowadays, with over half the world's population being bilingual, people are making opposite claims, suggesting all sorts of benefits for bilinguals. A new book has just appeared on this topic. It was first published in Spanish in 2017 and then in English in 2019. It's called The Bilingual Brain, and here to tell us about it is our science book critic, Harry Lewis. Harry, the author of the book was a man named Albert Costa, who sadly passed away in 2018. Albert Costa was bilingual himself, wasn't he?
That's right, bilingual in Spanish and Catalan, so that gave him a personal insight into what it's like to be bilingual. And that helps give the book a conversational and witty touch, making it extremely easy to read, even if you're completely new to the topic, like I was.
Of course, Costa spent years researching the subject, didn't he? Can you tell us about some of his findings or the research that he mentions in the book?
Well, there's lots of research into babies and language. For example, we know that 2-day-old babies tend to prefer listening to the language their mother speaks. So the baby of a mother who speaks Spanish will prefer listening to Spanish. But if the mother speaks 2 languages, the baby doesn't seem to have a preference for either language. However, they can notice a difference between the languages. They can distinguish between them even just after birth.
Do babies continue to develop these language skills?
Yes. When they're 4 to 6 months old, they can distinguish between 2 languages just by looking at the mouth of the person speaking to them. And then, at 8 months, they can tell the difference between languages they haven't even heard before, whatever the languages are.
What about if you aren't born bilingual but learn a foreign language later on?
Costa mentions the quote by the famous German writer Goethe. He once said, "He who does not know foreign languages knows nothing about his own." Whenever you learn a foreign language at any age, you get a deeper and broader understanding of culture in general. But what's really interesting is that it appears you get better at making decisions too. There's a famous test where they give people a dilemma. They ask people if they would push a person in front of a train in order to save 5 other lives. 400 native speakers of Spanish who spoke English as a second language answered the question. When the dilemma was presented in their first language, only 17% of the participants chose to sacrifice the person's life in order to save the other 5 people. When the same dilemma was presented in the second language, that same option was chosen in 40% of the cases. So it would seem that when people answer this question in their non-native language, they are more rational, they're more logical and analytical, and less emotional.
So why is that?
Well, Costa argues that people seem to have more psychological distance when they assess risks. Maybe this foreign language effect has a connection with an emotional distance that you may feel when you speak a different language.
Wasn't it Nelson Mandela who said something like, "Whenever you talk to someone in their first language, your message goes to their heart, but whenever you talk to them in their second, it goes to their head"?
That's right. In fact, Costa refers to that quote twice in his book. There might be a different explanation, though. Maybe people take more logical, analytical decisions in a foreign language simply because your brain has to work harder when you speak another language. Whatever the explanation is, being able to distance yourself emotionally is useful, particularly if you're in a situation where you have to negotiate.
I suppose that when you're speaking a foreign language, you can buy yourself time by acting like you haven't understood.
Yes. However well some diplomats or business people speak a foreign language, they often use this trick. And they may sometimes pretend to be less fluent than they really are in order to make the other person overconfident.
So, what about the theory that speaking another language can help your health?
In the book, Costa mentions that speaking another language can have important long-term benefits for your brain. He claims that it makes the brain stronger and more resilient, and can help delay the negative effects of aging and even delay dementia.
What about if you take up a new language when you're older?
It doesn't matter however late you start or the language you choose. Whichever language you learn can help to give you cognitive reserves that your brain can draw on. Just opening your mind to another language is going to help you keep your mind active and healthy. Oh, and one other interesting thing Costa suggests from his research into the bilingual brain is that bilingual people are slightly less egocentric than monolinguals. They can see puzzles and problems more easily from another person's point of view.
So it seems that knowing more than one language can have lots of benefits for us.
Absolutely. And if you're not convinced yet, I suggest reading Costa's book. It's full of solid research, but also lots of fascinating and funny stories and anecdotes.
Well, I'll definitely be picking up a copy and starting to learn a new language whenever I can. Thanks, Harry.
Unit 10. Developing Speaking. Exercise 2.
In this presentation, I'm going to talk about whether it would be better or not if everybody all around the world just spoke one and the same language, English. I'd like to begin by saying that I personally do not agree with the statement. Let me explain why. Firstly, I would argue that you cannot force people around the world to learn a different language instead of their mother tongue if they don't want to, whether that is English or any other language. Languages are passed down naturally from parents to their children. To try to impose a new language on a whole country and culture would simply not work, and would create inequality between the people who can speak English well and those who can't, those who are happy to speak the new language and those who are embarrassed to. Related to that last point is the question of culture. Whilst it is true that just having one worldwide language would make communication and business easier, language is not just about international communication. A language is also a reflection of how different nations and cultures think, how they feel, and how they create stories and traditions. To take away people's language is to take away part of their history and culture, and would make the world a far poorer, sadder place. Lastly, as I mentioned before, there's no denying that a common language like English would make communication around the world much easier. But in fact, it already does, without needing to replace any languages. Right now, all kinds of people around the world are learning English, which means we can all understand one another. Moreover, learning another language is adding to a person's culture and knowledge, whereas taking away a language is exactly the opposite. So, to sum up, I firmly believe that not only is it unrealistic to try to force people to leave their own language to one side, but it is also unnecessary. By encouraging as many people as possible to learn English as a second language, we can have the best of both worlds. The rich diversity of hundreds of different languages, each reflecting their own culture, and one international language that can help people to understand one another without barriers.
Unit 10. Check it. Vocabulary 1. Expressions with word.
Give somebody your word. In a word. Keep your word. Not in so many words. Put words into somebody's mouth. Just say the word. Spread the word. Take somebody's word for it. Words fail me. Or words to that effect.
Unit 10. Check it. Vocabulary 2. Expressions connected with communication.
Avoid jargon. Be on the same page. Convey a message. Find something puzzling. Get the wrong end of the stick. Make a gaffe. Make a witty remark. Misinterpret. Take something literally. Talk at cross purposes. Understand nuances.
Unit 10. Check it. Vocabulary 3. Phrasal verbs. Communication.
Back up. Bring up. Cut in. Cut off. Get through to. Let on. Make out. Open up to. Pick up on. Point out. Speak out against. Spell out. Talk down to. Tell off. Turn to.